All right, we are back with James Larson. We're doing a review of the Arendal Sound 1961 monitor. How you doing, James?
Good.
So this was an awesome review that you did. It's on the editorial side of Audioholics right now. If you go to audioholics.com, you could read James Larson's review of the Arendal Sound 1961. He does exhaustive measurements and listening tests. So if you want to really understand how these speakers sound, more than we're talking about in this review here, you could definitely go and read it. I'll put a link in the description below of the video. And James actually created a PowerPoint slide presentation I want to go over with you with this speaker. So James, this is kind of an unusual speaker. It's not quite a bookshelf. It's not quite a tower speaker. It's almost kind of its own category of speaker, would you say? Maybe I guess calling it a monitor is the proper way to call it based on what it does and what it is.
Yeah, it's an unusual speaker. I mean, I guess technically it's a stand mount speaker, which most people say is a bookshelf speaker, but you couldn't fit those underneath a bookshelf, obviously, unless you turn them, horizontally.
Mm-hmm.
And with respect to other bookshelf speakers in its like price segment, they're really shallow, and you can like wall mount them. They have these like Visa like wall mounts on the back of them, so you can use them as wall mounts pretty easily, and they wouldn't stick out too far out of your wall. So like they're shallow, kind of like, but high, tall stand mount speakers. Yeah, they're like monitor. Arendal calls these things monitor, but like it's a weird naming convention. I don't know. They're just stand mount speakers to me.
Yeah, usually monitor implies active. I don't know. I mean, I do see some companies doing that. So another application with a speaker that's this narrow, and I'll show you guys the specs. You could actually easily put this behind an acoustically transparent screen if you create a little cavity behind it. I mean, I think, what are these, like 6.5 inches deep? So they're not, 6 inches deep, and they're 6.5 inches wide. So they're definitely easy to tuck behind a screen if you just build your screen off the wall a little bit.
Yeah, because they're sealed. There's nothing in back of them. And they kind of depend on, I think they depend on some boundary loading to get the bass, to subwoofer frequencies. It's like, to meet the sub at like 80 hertz. Well, you'll see in the low frequency response graph, but yeah, they'd be really, really good for that. But like,
go ahead.
I'd say they would be good for like, if you wanted to do that, maybe like a small home theater. These aren't powerful enough for a large home theater, but if you wanted to like put them behind a false baffle in a small home theater, they'd be really good for that.
So the one interesting thing about this speaker is it's not a speaker that you'd want to listen to without a subwoofer. It's actually designed purposely to work with the subwoofer, and there's reasons why companies would do something like that, James. And I would say part of it is to extend the sensitivity, to get more dynamic range out of a speaker, and also to keep the box size, like you pointed out, much smaller, more manageable.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of companies would probably have made this a much larger ported speaker, but like, why, right? Because almost everyone who's going to use this type of speaker is going to use a subwoofer with them. So like you see a lot of companies that they would probably have like significantly more extension, but a larger box size. And like, there's no, for an audience or for a buyer or market that owns subwoofers, right? So like, it's a smart thing to do. I'm surprised more people don't do it.
Yeah, it's true, because now you don't have to worry about SBIR effects of having a tower speaker out into the room. You could put the bass, the woofers, the subwoofers where they belong, towards the corners or in the front wall of the room. And getting a system like this, these 2 speakers or 3 speakers matching LCRs and then adding 2 subs, not only are you going to have great home theater, but you're going to have really good music, much better than you would from a passive tower speaker with just bass modules below it in most cases. But I digress. Let's go over your review findings here. You can see the specs over here. We already have that clear. Wow, these things are shipped they're packed pretty well too, huh?
Yeah, I mean, Arendal always does that. I wish other companies would follow their like lead on this, because like everything they ship is like really, really well packed, right? I mean, you can see from these pictures, they're like heavy duty boxing and like, big polyethylene foam standoffs, and they're packed in these like almost rayon, almost silky sacks, like these drawstrings like bags. It's just so good, and it shows that they care about, they have to be packed good, because you can't buy these at the store. You're gonna come through like parcel service, so they're gonna take a beating, right? There's no way they can't, right? So like,
yeah, and also they give you a 60-day trial period on these speakers, and they, shipping is free on them. So obviously they want to make sure these things come in good condition, and if they do return, that they return in good condition.
yeah, so it's another smart move. I mean, packing is expensive. What a lot of people don't realize, packing is expensive to do all this right, So like, yeah, it's not cheap to do, but they do it to make sure that your products arrive to you in good condition.
Yep.
Here's obviously pictures of the speakers with and without grills. Again, we're one of the only like review sites to show you what speakers look like with grills. I think that's kind of important, so I always put that in my reviews.
Yeah.
Like, we're the only ones who do it. I don't understand it, right? But here they are. So yeah, you can go to the next slide. I think they look pretty good.
I actually like the way they look with the grills, to be honest with you. It gives a little bit more of a contrast. But that, obviously the best performance is always without a grill. But in this case, I kind of like it with the grill.
The grills don't cause much of an effect on them. And they also come in, like, we have these in white, obviously, and you can get them in black too.
Yeah.
So here's close-ups of the driver. The layout of this speaker is pretty simple. It's a sealed speaker with two, what were they, five and a quarters, five and a half, I think, 5.5. Yeah, and a 1-inch dome tweeter loaded and a waveguide. So like, it's simple. Well, acoustic, the engineering is simple but very good, as we'll see. So you can go on to the next slide. Here's the rear of the speaker. See, what's nice about these, like I was saying, you have those via ESA mounts, right? So you can wall mount them really easy, and you see the little the indentation below the binding post. You can thread. You don't need that. Actually, you don't need that like 90-degree speaker cable at the terminals. You can just thread these things through that little slot there. So like, these are very easy to wall mount. And you can also see a keyhole slot mount at the top of the speaker. Very easy to wall mount.
So that's awesome, guys. If you're looking for a speaker that you want to have like an LCR arrangement with your TV, and you're considering a sound bar, you could mount this pretty much as easily as a sound bar, and you're going to get much better performance. I mean, it's just, think about that. If you can get this as a mountable thing on each side of your 75-inch or 85-inch TV, whatever, and then put one horizontally below it, that's awesome. I mean, that's a soundbar killing system.
Yeah, it would be much better than any soundbar for sure, with a subwoofer, of course.
And look at the build quality of this thing. I mean, the devil's in the details. Look at the connectors on it, just how everything is chamfered. I mean, it's like the 1723 series. I mean, you're getting that kind of build quality out of a speaker for relatively low price. $1,100 a pair is really not that much when you're dealing with a high performance bookshelf or monitor style speaker like this.
Yeah, they're built like a tank. I mean, the build quality here is really good. I mean, you knock the side of this thing, right? Mm-hmm. It's totally inert. It's really, really, really good.
So, James, I think one thing that we forgot to mention on the drivers is they use a very similar waveguide technology on the tweeter like they have in the 1723s. And there's a substantial motor on both of the drivers, right? I know you talked about this in your review, in the written review.
Yeah, I mean, beefy motors, very wide dynamic range. You have to have that for these speakers. The tweeter motor is crazy. Like, it's a really, really beefy magnet on that thing. So it's a high sensitivity, relatively high sensitivity, like driver. These are high performance parts. So like, yeah, they're really good for the money.
Right. Okay, so here we have, this is when you did the measurements outdoors. This is not an in-room measurement. You actually put this on a platter outdoors and you measured all around the speaker and you came up with basically a CTA 2034 graph.
Yeah, normally we have a picture of this, but I think on that day I was measuring these, I forgot to take that picture. But anyways, yeah, I mean, we did the same as we normally do in all of our reviews. You can see pictures of how we do it. And this is really, really, really good. It's like, what is that window from like 10 kilohertz to like 200 hertz? You're talking about a plus or minus 2 dB window, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, even better than that on axis. But like, I think the listening window response is more important than on-axis response, and that's the kind of like breadth of linearity you're talking about there. So it's like really, really good. Everything here is really good. Basically,
what you're seeing is a speaker that's incredibly neutral. And because it has a very good, smooth, and predictable off-axis response, it's amenable to EQing. If you want to do some EQ, on a speaker like this, you'll actually get some benefit from it. It won't, sound weird if you EQ it and then move from one seat to another seat.
Yeah, this is a sort of response that like auto EQ systems love, because it's so predictable to EQ, and there's no weird off-axis stuff going on. Now, the on-axis responses is reflective of the the off-axis response is reflective of the on-axis sound. Yeah. So like, it gets a little weird on axis at like above 10 kilohertz, where it doesn't really matter too much, right? And it's just not even bad. It just starts getting a little rocky with respect to the lower range, but it's still pretty darn good.
Well, I never EQ out to 20K. Usually when I use auto EQ, I limit it to 5 to 10 kilohertz. I just find I get better results by not doing that. And if you need to boost the treble at all, do it with a shelving filter. If you need a little tilt in the treble, that's just my take.
I'd say the best way to EQ a speaker and those high frequency ranges is just to have a good speaker, right?
Yeah.
Just have a nice linear speaker. Okay, here's a graph of the on-axis versus off-axis responses in kind of a waterfall format. And like, you can see how consistent all these curves are with respect to each other. The different off-axis curves are, and they flow, they correspond with each other beautifully. So like, again, that's really good for equalization or just listening off axis. You don't need to like be.
What you're showing here with all these measurements is you're showing an incredibly neutral speaker, predictable speaker. This is an ideal kind of speaker as a studio monitor. If you want to actually mix music on it, I think you said this in your review, it's accurate enough and neutral enough to be doing that, right?
I think you could use these as a studio monitor. Some home audio speakers I find that are linear enough to do that. I don't remember if I said that about these particular speakers, but I think you could, because they are more linear than some of the studio monitors I've tested out there. So like, yeah, they'd be fine as far as I'm concerned. You'd probably end up with a pretty good mix if you use them as a studio monitor.
Yep.
But you can see the waveguide, they do beam a little bit like above 14 kilohertz, where it really doesn't matter. I don't think you or I or many of the people listening to this can hear that well above that point, right? But like, if you want the high treble sound, you've got to listen to these kind of on or near the on axis. But even then, it's better than most speakers in that range. So like, it's just good news all around on these response graphs. What this graph is telling us, you can read more about it on our on the published review about how to read and interpret these graphs. But the bottom line for this graph is that out to 50 degrees, this will have a very even sound. So like, tonally, you can go out to almost 50 degrees and it'll sound the same that's a very wide angle to have such a consistent sound. So like, there's not a bad seat in the house with this speaker. It'll all sound the same tonally, no matter where you are in any reasonable listening area.
Yep. Okay.
Here's a graph, kind of a 3D waterfall graph of the vertical response. So like, going from up to down, and these speakers are kind of standing vertically. And this is actually better than most MTMs. This would also be the waterfall response if you laid one of these horizontally, like a center speaker. Mm-hmm. So like, you see those lobes, like, or there was like dips and valleys off axis. Yeah. Well, every single MTM speaker would have this on the plane that the drivers are arranged on. And this is no different, except this is better than most. Most would squeeze those peaks would squeeze the off-axis response inward more, but this somehow has a really good even response out to a wider angle than you'd see with most MTM designs. So like, I think the next graph shows how it looks in a polar map, which matters more. So you get a nice out to, like, I would say 15 degrees, which is better than what most MTM designs get. You get a really even response. So that gives you a better angle, a wider angle of listening than most MTM center speakers.
Yeah, so we don't normally recommend MTMs horizontally mounted for center channels, but in this case, I should preface that if you're sitting beyond a 20 degrees, plus or minus 20 degrees off axis from the tweeter itself, we prefer three-way center channels. But in this case, this one actually behaves exceptionally well for an MTM. So unless you're sitting all the way to a side seat where your angle is beyond 25 degrees, you can use this speaker safely horizontally and get good results. Of course, if you could do all three of them vertical, like behind a screen at the same height, with all the tweeters being at the same ear height, that would be ideal. but this is usable as a horizontal speaker for a center channel for sure.
Yeah, this is like exceptionally good for an MTM horizontal design. It still has some of the problems, but there's like so much like they're so much less, I don't know, less bad than the normal MTMs. Yeah, so yeah, it's a good center speaker. Shockingly, for an MTM, it's good. So like that's weird.
That's good engineering again. And another thing we didn't probably touch on, but it's in your review, is if you're setting this up as a stereo pair, vertically oriented, you want to get your seated ear level height around the same height as the tweeter, because the vertical array of drivers does narrow some of the vertical dispersion of the speaker. So you want to try to sit at ear level, basically.
Yeah, but these give you more flexibility since their vertical dispersion is relatively wide. So you don't have to have your the tweeters right on your ear level. No, you've got a lot of play there. So like that's a really good thing about these speakers. Most MTMs wouldn't give you that kind of like the ones I see behind you, Gene. I would guess they probably wouldn't have this much like flexibility in the vertical axis, right? But so these are like unusually good.
Yeah, because this has a much bigger driver, so the eights are further apart.
Yeah, so like this is just if I had to have an MTM, this would be like as a center speaker. These are really, really good ones.
Yeah.
And here's a measurement of the low frequency response we did in a ground plane setting. Like you can see, very flat out to like it gently curves downward, around 100 hertz. It's a sealed speaker design, and this is like normal sealed speaker stuff. I think it's a little bit more steeper than your usual 12 dB per octave roll off. So I think there might be like a little bit of a high pass filter going on in the speaker, but it's pretty gradual. So like the bottom line is you need a subwoofer for these speakers. They're designed to be used with a subwoofer, but they have a really nice flat response down to subwoofer range frequencies.
And the nice thing about this is it just makes it easy to integrate with a subwoofer, a bass response like this. So if you're a neophyte and you're not very into the advanced measurements and stuff like this, if you got a pair of these speakers or 3 of these speakers and you bass manage all your speakers in your system to 80 hertz and set up 1 or 2 subs, chances are your auto correction system is going to get things pretty tuned in. Maybe you have to adjust the delay of the subwoofer a little bit, but I think this is a much easier system to integrate than trying to do a pair of bass heavy towers or bookshelf speakers and trying to run those at a lower crossover or trying to even run them full range. This is really designed to work with the bass management of a AVR.
I think it should also, what makes them also amenable to like the integration with the subwoofer is a sealed design. So there's no phase like weirdness of the port. There's no phase rotation of the port. Yeah, so it's like it's a lot easier to integrate with a sub without any speaker port shifting the phase like 180 degrees and then coming back down again. It's going to have a very consistent phase response in addition to the frequency response. Here's
impedance and phase.
Yeah, and the electrical impedance. It's a 4 ohm speaker. It has a pretty consistent 4 ohm impedance load. There's not really much to worry about here. It's good news.
Another thing to point out is a lot of companies will lie about the impedances of their speakers, or most brands would probably rate this a 6 or an 8 ohm speaker. And the fact that that's 4 ohm rated and it's only dipping down to 5 ohms, the minimal impedance for a 4 ohm speaker to meet IEC or ITU standard is 3.2 ohms. So this thing is only going down to 5 ohms. It's really, they're being conservative about how they're rating it as a 4 ohm speaker.
Yeah, it does dip below 5 ohms, but what's good about this is, well, it's not an 8 ohm speaker by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah. It doesn't have like really wild impedance swings. Like it doesn't go way up and then way down. It's not, it's very consistent. So like, it's not,
it's resistive looking almost, except for the peak. Yeah.
Yeah. You could drive, I mean, probably someone would say, oh, you need an outboard amp for these kind of speakers. And that would be probably better, but you could drive these with an AVR. Most AVRs can take this kind of load.
I would say any $1,000 AVR today would have no problem driving these, especially because you're bass managing and they're not doing anything below 80 hertz. Yeah, you'd be fine.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't have to worry about, giving these super special amplifiers or anything. It'll help because they can handle the power, but they'll still sound good with like a normal AVR. So
the bottom line on the Arendal Sound 1961 monitors, James puts here, excellent response neutrality, which we spoke about. You saw that in the measurements. The wide dynamic range, because now you've got two drivers instead of one doing, mid frequencies, and you also have it bass managed, and it's not trying to produce bass, so it's tuned for higher sensitivity. That gives the wider dynamic range. Great build quality, James. I mean, you've had so many Arendal Sound speakers in your hands, and I'd have to say, based on what I read from what you were saying, is these things are built a cut above what most other competitors are doing at these price points, right?
Sure. Oh yeah, big time. Yes, that's what blew me away when I first received the Arendal. I think the first ones I ever had was the Arendal 1723s.
The monitors, I think.
Yeah,
right?
I was so blown. I contacted you and Matt Photos right away. I said, you guys got to see these things. It's incredible. And that's like, we got to get more stuff. And I was so blown away by the build quality, just unpacking them, that like I knew I wanted more Arendal stuff. And like, yeah, and this keeps that. I mean, it's not as good as the 1723, but it's a lot less expensive, and it's extremely good for the price. And the size, it's built, like we said, it's built like a tank. So,
yeah, and then the only con is what it's designed to do. So it's really not a con in this case, but it's not a full range or an even near full range type of speaker. You definitely need to have a subwoofer with these if you want to enjoy full range sound.
Yeah, it's not a con. It's just kind of a facet of their design. They need to be used with the subwoofer, and probably a lot of speakers, should be used with the subwoofer that claim to be full range anyway. So,
Absolutely. And I just love the fact that they're low profile. They're easy to mount on a wall. So a lot of struggles people have is they have no floor space to put speakers. Imagine now you could get this high performance monitor as an alternative to soundbars or just ordinary LCR speakers that you can mount. I've seen other brands do these usually they're rinky dink ones with a 3-inch woofer. They don't have any type of serious output. These things have serious dynamic range and a great alternative to a lot of the other stuff that's out there if you're looking for something that's compact that fits up against the wall especially.
Yeah, it's a weird form factor, and I'm surprised nobody else has done this, but it's kind of got the market all to itself for what it's doing. And it's a good idea.
Right.
A few competing loudspeakers I listed. I was kind of hesitant to list these, but because they're not the same.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, they're normal speakers, right? These are normal bookshelf speakers. There's nothing really like the Arendal 1961 monitors.
Yeah.
Because they're shallow, wall mountable, stand mount speakers, and these are all they're alternatives, and I'm sure they would all be pretty good, in the sound.
Mm-hmm.
They're not quite the same, and there's no on walls like the 1961 monitors either. They're like in a class of their own. So while I have this list of competing speakers, there's not, it's not, there's nothing really like them.
And I would venture to say that those other speakers, they all probably have much better bass extension than the Arendal, but I'm telling you, the Arendal probably could play louder and has more dynamic range because of what it is, the way they designed it.
Yeah, they have to have more dynamic range. So
especially over the ELACs. ELACs tend to be like 85 dB sensitivity, and they just don't play that loud, from my experience.
Yeah, the ELACs, I mean, they've always been a little soft on the dynamic range department. I think that's their older speakers. Their newer speakers might be much better. I would hope so. Ravel's, of course, very good dynamic range, as well as JBLs and the SVS. The ones I don't know about here are the Wharfdales, but they look like they would compete against we're gonna look at covering some Wharfdale in the future because they do look like they have a nice product line. But these are all good speakers on this list. But like you said, James, this one is quite a different category in this price range, and I think Arendal is cornering this kind of segment if this is a speaker that you're looking for.
I love the fact that it's a speaker that I could recommend to people because it's so easy to integrate, because we do consultations often and people are always asking me, what do you recommend I set up in my system? I'm not very advanced at doing measurements. I try to look for stuff that's easy setup. And this is one of those products. It's an easy setup product.
What you could do with these also, I should say, well, we've been kind of reviewing them as a left to right, pair. These would be a really good solution to wall-mounted surround speakers, like bed layer surround speakers.
Yeah.
Because like they do have better, like we said, vertical dispersion, or like wider vertical dispersion than most MTM monitors. So I think these could be used really as a great like surround speaker in a like larger home theater room, even because they could handle wide dynamic range, surround. I wouldn't use them in a large theater and like as OCRs in a large home theater, but you could use them as surrounds in a large home theater. They can take that kind of punishment. So yeah.
So I want to find out if you guys if you're using Arendal speakers, tell me if this is a good idea or if you're doing it now. I want to see 5 wall-mounted 1961 speakers in a theater, in a small theater environment where you have the LCRs all on the wall, the side channels, or even the back channels. Let's do 7 channels. I'd love to see a layout that has 7 of these speakers wall mounted. I think it would look cool and it would sound really awesome. And of course, pairing it with a couple of the 1961 sealed subwoofers would really put the icing on the cake and give you that full range sound.
I mean, you could pair them with the 1961 subs, but
you're going to want a 1723.
Yeah. I would go for the 1723. The 1961 subs are good. We have full reviews on them, no doubt, but the 1723s are awesome. So yeah. So that's just a little, my little like adjustment of your setup there.
Awesome. Well, there you go, guys. We're going to put some links down below. As you know, our Arendal Sound is a channel affiliate. So if you do purchase through them, we get a small commission on that. Guys, don't forget about our Patreon channel at patreon.com/audioholics. We appreciate your support. You get direct access to me if you want to suggest video topics. And the last but not least, I'm going to be at Audio Advice in just a week and a half, August 4th through 6th in Raleigh, North Carolina. So I hope you guys are registering. I'm going to be putting a link down below if you haven't registered yet. Hope to see you there. James, I know you won't be there, but you'll be there in spirit. I'll live vicariously for you, and you can listen to all the experiences I get, and we can talk about it in a live stream.
Sure, that'd be cool.
So I'm going to end this now with just a little promo for Audio Advice so you guys could check out what this event is all about.
The premier audio and video experience in the United States, this August 4th through the 6th. In Raleigh, North Carolina, Audio Advice Live is going bigger, bolder, and louder. Audio Advice Live is the best place to learn about the latest trends in high-performance audio, home theater, 2-channel, turntables, or headphones. Meet with the industry's top experts, brands, and influencers to hear all the latest and greatest gear live and in person. Register to attend now at audioadvice.live.